Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for what is the seventh session in our Shoonya webinar series, where we discuss the key building blocks of India's zero pollution mobility transition and hear directly from people shaping its future on the ground. Today's discussion will look at how India's EV transition is reshaping workforce needs across manufacturing, servicing, charging, and fleet operations. We'll explore what it will take to align skilling systems and institutions with these evolving demands while ensuring that this transition remains inclusive. That being said, here's what you can expect over the next hour. We'll begin with a short presentation to familiarize everyone with the Shoonya campaign, and then we'll dive right into the panel discussion featuring our panel of experts. So without further delay, allow me to take a quick moment to introduce the campaign and the impact it's creating through its partner network. As some of you may already be aware, that Shoonya was launched by Niti Aayog in collaboration with RMI in September 2021 to accelerate zero pollution mobility in India. The specific focus of the campaign was on final mile deliveries and ride hailing. These segments were identified as early opportunities for electrification, given their high daily usage and relatively centralized operations. At its core, Shoonya's vision has been threefold. First, to build awareness and demand for zero pollution rides and deliveries among consumers. Second, to recognize and amplify industry efforts that are fast tracking India's EV transition. And third, to help chart a credible pathway towards 100% electrification in these segments. Tanishka, if we could move to the next slide, please. And to deliver on this vision, Shoonya operates through three key pillars. One is the corporate engagement, second, resource toolkits, and lastly, the consumer awareness. On corporate engagement, the campaign has brought over 245 partners together, spanning delivery platform, fleet operators, charging providers, financiers, OEMs, which is creating a strong industry backbone for action. On resource toolkits, Shoonya has launched over three practical tools, with a finance toolkit to help navigate EV lending options for consumers, an EV calculator to compare costs and emissions, a policy map that simplifies national and state EV policies and incentives. And finally, on consumer awareness, through our MyGov collaboration, Shoonya has reached over 25 million citizens, directly engaging over 2.5 lakh people through campaigns and hosting around 15 public activities to build momentum for zero pollution transport. And together, these efforts have enabled over 1.3 billion zero emission rides and deliveries, resulting in over 1,500 crores in fuel savings to date. With that, let me bring our panelists in for today, all of whom who are closely involved in EV transition. I'll take a moment to introduce them in alphabetical order. So firstly, we're delighted to have Ms. Anjali Ravi Kumar, Chief Sustainability Officer at Eternal. Anjali leads sustainability efforts across one of India's largest delivery networks with Zomato and Blinkit, with a strong focus on responsible sourcing, waste management, and social impact. Anjali's work also reflects a growing emphasis on building inclusive and resilient systems at scale, particularly in rapidly evolving sectors such as electric mobility. So welcome to the panel, Anjali. Next, we're pleased to welcome Dr. B.K. Panigrahi. Dr. Panigrahi is a distinguished professor at IIT Delhi and the founding head of the Center of Automotive Research and Tribology. Dr. Panigrahi's work spans AI in power systems, electric mobility, and smart grids, bringing a strong academic and research perspective to emerging technologies which are shaping the EV ecosystem. Welcome to the panel, Professor. We're then glad to have Dr. Rajni Tiwari, Chief People Officer at
Perhaps we have lost the sound.
Yeah. Thank you, Vaibhav. We can't hear you, but I can take it from here. Dr. Rajni, we are pleased to welcome you to the panel. You're Chief People Officer with GreenCell Mobility. It's a pleasure to have you. We also have with us our fourth speaker, which is Sudhamini Zutshi. She's Business Development and Partnership Manager with Purpose. It's a pleasure having you as well, Sudhamini. And lastly, we have Sharif Kamar. He's Associate Director, Transport and Urban Governance with TERI. Thank you so much to all the panelists for joining us for this very important session today. I am Chetna Nagpal. I'll be moderating this session today. Just a very warm welcome to all the attendees as well. This is the seventh session in the Shoonya webinar series. Over the course of the series, we have discussed key building blocks of India's EV transition, including charging infrastructure, financing, batteries, fleet electrification, and more. Today, we turn to a theme that underpins all of this progress: skilling, reskilling, capacity building for an inclusive EV transition. Because the EV transition is not just about vehicles, charging, or technology, it is also about people, institutions, and systems. And as the sector evolves, new roles are emerging not just across manufacturing, but also servicing, charging infrastructure, fleet operations, and more. We have an excellent panel today with us, bringing perspectives from industry, academia, businesses, and civil society organizations. I'll begin with a quick opening round as part of this panel. Then we'll move to speaker specific questions. And lastly, we'll end with a rapid fire round. Now, to get us started, I want to begin with a broad framing question for everybody on this panel. Looking across the EV supply chain, from manufacturing to maintenance to charging to fleet operations and servicing, which segment do you think has the most urgent and underserved workforce needs right now, and why do you think so? Um, Anjali, let me begin with you, and then we'll go over others for the same question.
Thank you so much for having the Eternal group participate in this. Eternal, as you know, runs Zomato, the food delivery platform, Blinkit, which is a quick commerce platform, District, which is a going out and events and tickets booking platform, and Hyperpure, which serves as a restaurant supplies platform. But we use EVs across three of our businesses quite actively. That is Zomato, Blinkit, and Hyperpure. And, I now will speak from the perspective of a buyer of transportation services, because while I do run a logistics and tech business, almost 100% of the logistics is third-party logistics or provided by individuals. So effectively, what's happening in the economy is also happening. My business is very dependent on what is happening in the overall transport sector in India in general. All right. So, in fact, if I were to ask people on the webinar, how many vehicles do you think Eternal owns, given its presence in 900 cities, what do you think the answer would be? Any answers? Maybe from my co-panelists, since they can answer. Well, pretty close. Sucharita, I can see someone has answered. And Nishant has also attempted this. Well, you're right, actually, very close, probably like 2 office cars. Okay, literally 2 office cars, no bikes. And that's it. So all of those millions and millions of kilometers are being are really third-party owned vehicles. Right now, they are either provided to us through a transportation business service, what are typically called fleet operators or third-party services. It's a 3PL service, so to say, third-party logistics service, or they are individuals who sign up to our platforms to undertake deliveries on a part-time basis. And just for anyone who's new to the topic, the definition of a gig worker is someone who will sign up. A platform-based gig worker is someone who will sign up to a platform and undertake work based on his or her availability for work, bringing their own vehicle to the job. And this is a very, very important thing to understand, because it's going to color everything else I tell you. It is their own vehicle. Now, where they have sourced this vehicle from, how they have sourced this vehicle, will help you eventually understand the kind of barriers to that they are facing, right? A lot of people might be renting, a lot of people might be borrowing, a lot of people may use a family vehicle, and yes, there will be a substantial number who own their own vehicle. Now, but what all this means is, therefore, when you ask me the question of where are the missing skills, I can say with a lot of confidence that there are skills missing across the value chain. In fact, I wouldn't say it's in any one area, because for an ecosystem to develop, all of these systems have to develop simultaneously. The only way my delivery partner will ever get the confidence to invest in an EV is if it is firstly affordable, which depends on manufacturing skills and the scale of manufacturing. Large scale manufacturing depends on the availability of large scale skilled workforce for manufacturing. Then he will only purchase an EV if there is adequate servicing options available, if he doesn't have to worry about what will happen if my vehicle breaks down. Ideally, the way for him to experience it is through rental. So there have to be fleet operators at scale. We do not have that in India today. We have few fleet operators operating in a limited number of cities, and definitely not serving the scale of operations that we have. Fleet operations is incredibly it's incredibly ops intensive, as the definition suggests. We also need skills in, I would add, skills in financing of these particular vehicles, because they represent a very, they have unique characteristics which with the present day financiers cannot understand. So you need specialists in that domain as well, or you need AI models to help you understand the right amount of financing and the right interest rates to be able to offer. So across the board, sorry to disappoint and say that and not suggest that there is one silver bullet area. That's definitely not the case. And on the charging and battery swapping front, there too, until and unless my delivery partner can see in front of him adequate number of charging and swapping points, they will not get the confidence to make this switch.
Thanks, Anjali, and thanks for touching upon the informal third-party logistics and the need for their training and how important it is for them to see the charging infrastructure. Dr. Panigrahi, I want to come to you next with the same question. Where are you seeing the most exciting workforce reskilling opportunities or the need for it?
Yeah. Anjali ma'am has already answered the question. There is not a single point which you want to tell that this particular segment is not at the right stage. So I always used to tell the EV ecosystem is just starting. So when you are just starting, and you can look into, there are, like ma'am has told, various type of customer, whether it is an individual customer or it is a fleet operator or it is a public service operator, whether it is a two-wheeler or three-wheeler or four-wheeler or bus. Everybody's demand is different. Everybody's uses pattern is different. So absolutely, there is not a single area where we are not at the comfortable level or confidence level, because it is starting. That's why when you start something, then definitely we must thank our government and the policymaker and the public awareness platform like you are doing. This is very important to make the awareness. And I can tell one thing, rather than going over the charging infrastructure or battery or the fleet operator or AIML or everything. You see, like ma'am has told, the most important thing as an academician, I look into the manpower development, HRD, human resource development. So we need expertise in all those domains. So one of the thing which I used to come, and that is my personal view, when I have my initial EV, the bigger question come to mind is, I'm not bothered whether there is a charging station outside or not, because my running is hardly 20 kilometer or 30 kilometer a day. So a customer like me who travels 50 kilometer, charging at home in night is a comfortable option. I'm very, very familiar with that. And I always give the example, the three premier institutes nearby, IIT Delhi, NCRT, AIMS and JNU, all are educated one. Everybody can adapt that EV and do that. But the only question comes into my mind at that time when I have an EV, if my EV breaks down somewhere else, where I will go? Because I know if my IC engine breaks down in a radius of 1 kilometer, I can find out a lot of mechanics who can solve my problem. And all those mechanics not necessarily is having a BTech automobile degree or BTech mechanical engineering, studying the two-stroke engine and four-stroke engine. So you know where I'm driving on. So every domain, technical skill is important, but the skilling and reskilling of the existing sector in the IC engine is also another important aspect where we should work together. That is the most important thing. It's not the educational institute impact training, but it's the other thing also. The OEMs, the stakeholders have to come forward. So this is also one of the domain, the skilling, reskilling, upskilling, whatever you may tell, whatever you add on the end or before the skill factor, it is one of the important aspect where we have to also focus on that. And I'm thankful. I was a part of a team of the Niti Aayog to promote this in different educational institutes, starting from IIT, NIT, and going to a lower level in different educational institutes. So that is my take on your particular question. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Panigrahi. I think you've rightly touched upon the need for awareness and the role that the institutions can play. Rajni, I want to come to you next with the same question.
So, thank you. Really, it's like, it's a lot of echo because you know that this is the right thing and this is what you're hearing. And for once, it is positive echo. So, which is, kind of giving you the conviction that you are at least on the right track in terms of what we want to achieve, overall objective. Yes, Dr. Panigrahi rightly said there is a lot of work which government has done, and there are a lot of policies which are around that. I think if we leverage on those which we have done at our organization, there is awareness also becomes easier because first you have to be aware to tell somebody what all is there. And there was a lot of in-depth study we conducted for over 2 years to understand that where what is that you really want to do to really strengthen the whole system of skill for ev skilling is not limited to only battery charging operations. I think the biggest bottleneck becomes the maintenance. Why? Because your dependency on other countries initially, and just kind of bending and leaning towards that technology to understand how this can be done better, to what we have achieved in last 2 to 3 years, where we see remarkable work which has been done. But yes, like again Dr. Panigrahi had emphasized, it started. It'll take a momentum. And I think skilling in its own way is a journey. And when you want to create the right workforce, you first need to invest. It'll not come handy. So you have to be like, like initially also it was touched upon that the financing institutions, you need to, as it is a sustainable business, will not see a lot of black PNL initially. Why? Because there is a lot of investment. It's an asset heavy business. Now, how do you do that? How do you leverage? So I think cross education with other partners also. Because initially everybody started setting up their own charging stations and so on and so forth. And suddenly people realize it is not right or wrong. It is, like I said, it's a journey. It will move with people. It will, as you get your learnings, you will also see who can you lean on, who can you piggyback on, and where do you see all this cross educational elements which can help the overall ecosystem. If the objective is defined in that way, that ultimately it is skilled workforce EV for India, I think that will be a larger statement and a more direct statement to work for than to your micro channels, your own organizations, because then you are just targeting it from a short term perspective.
Thank you, Rajni. I think you've rightly pointed about the awareness initiatives and the need for them, and how there's a need for the skilled workforce and it requires our attention at this time. So, Damini, I want to bring you here next. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing the comms perspective. I think I just want to set a context a little bit about where our insights come from. So the campaign we've been running called Nayi Soch Ki Savari, we've done around 200 hyper-local events, mass awareness events in 13 states and 55 districts across India. And we managed to engage and do a baseline with over 2,500 drivers, around 1,000 fleet operators, and nearly 500 mechanics. And if I were to bring an insight of the conversations we've been having from that trucking ecosystem to Shoonya, it is that service and maintenance ecosystems currently are, and specifically the independent mechanics and small workshops, they are currently the most underserved part of this transition around skilling. And what's interesting is that it's not a story of resistance, because when we did our baseline, what we found is that there was an overwhelming willingness to reskill. Over upwards of 90% of our mechanics wanted to reskill, and they are not intimidated by the EV technology. The anxiety for them is coming from, will they be left out or not? So I think the critical insight over there is that it's not a barrier of mindset, it's a barrier of access and structural inclusion for them. And I think that is why it matters so much, specifically, even when you look at skilling of the small mechanics and workshops, it's a conversation around adoption rather than just around reskilling. Because if servicing is the backbone that builds trust for the transition, you have to be able to have your vehicle reliably repaired. We know that specifically in the two, three-wheeler segment, there is a dependence on low downtime, on, having this local repair ecosystem. So right now, what's happening in this ecosystem is that there is very limited access to, for instance, high voltage training. There's very limited like certification pathways for them. There's a high cost for diagnostic tools for them. All of this needs to be not just theoretical, but actually usable on ground. And there needs to be a space where academicians like Dr. Pahenegri and Sharif and the industry comes together to find real world solutions to these problems. Thank you.
Thanks, Sudhamini. Thanks for sharing about your on-ground work and echoing what you said about the need for looking at servicing segment as well. Sharif's inviting you next to wrap up the opening session.
Well, thanks, Chetna, and thanks to Shoonya Campaign, Niti Aayog, and RMI for inviting and making us speak about a very pertinent issue right now. Although I'm saying it as an issue, but it is also it should be taken as an opportunity as well for the overall job perspective in the automotive sector. Now, I'll begin with and I'll try and summarize as to where we stand in terms of the shift that we are looking at. So, from an OEM perspective, if you speak to OEM and you understand what's going on in the past 7, 8 years, 10 years, there are two paradigm shifts that has happened in the automotive sector. One, in the ICE technology, the technology has shifted from BS4 to BS6. We call it leapfrogging from BS4 to BS6, where a lot of IT and technology-led interventions have been coming in. The second intervention, of course, is, or the paradigm shift is related to electric vehicles. Now, electric vehicles aggravate the skilling requirement much more than the regular ICE, even BS6 vehicles or technology that we have right now. So we have two shifts, and both of these are being tackled by OEMs on their own largely. In terms of getting their skilled resources at the manufacturing plant or the assembly floor, as well as from their tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 components of manufacturers and suppliers. So they'll have to there is an upstream training requirement, skilling requirement that is being done through their partners in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3s, component manufacturer suppliers. We also have on the downstream front. So once vehicle is manufactured, the plant, the distributor also needs to be upskilled and towards a large extent reskilled at the point of sale. Very interestingly, what we see as EV purchase, owners or prospective EV buyers, you'll see the knowledge about electric vehicles at the purchaser level or the buyer level is much higher as compared to what we see at the dealer level. Going to these shops, the person buying an electric vehicle will have invariably much more information than the person selling these vehicles. So these OEMs also need to train those skills at the ground as well. So that's the first interaction that you have as a buyer of electric vehicles. The second, of course, all our panelists mentioned about the service sector. Servicing would require a massive investment from the distributor, from the OEMs to upscale the skilling requirement to tackle the problems and the challenges and the maintenance part of electric vehicles. Again, there are a lot of EV owners who know much better than the person servicing these electric vehicles. I can share with my own experience of dealing with some of the service center colleagues there. Now, the other point, and I think Dr. Panigrahi mentioned about the roadside assistance. We need to be very cautious as to, and there is a dichotomy in there, because EVs, they come with a warranty, and if it is tampered with at a non-service distribution level, so warranty could be affected in that sense. So therefore, we need to be cautious in training these roadside assistants and people going for roadside assistance for electric vehicle maintenance and servicing. The fourth point, and I'll stop after this, is the operation side. And we all agree that charging infrastructure requires a very different skill set, not only in terms of installing it, but also keeping it on or running. And that's where the reliability comes into the picture. Once this particular topic and change is going to happen, it will have a huge impact on the sale of EVs as well. So charging infrastructure, uptime of it will need a skilling of the charge point operators. And that's where we at TERI have been working with Mercedes-Benz along with IIT Delhi and EVI Tech on training charging CPOs, charge point operators. We have also now tied up with MOFCC for their plans and programs on training electric vehicle related skilling, as well as we are looking at NABARD as one of the possible collaborators on this. But whatever we are doing is just a drop in the ocean. We require a massive effort, a centralized effort towards EV skilling. And in our roadmap for EV skilling, which was submitted to Ministry of Heavy Industry, the report, it talks about a centralized EV skilling and development council, just as ASDC that we have in the automotive sector. We should have one EV-focused EV skilling program, which could be championed by ministries, MOFCC, MHI, as well as MORTH. Chetna, thanks a lot. I'll stop here.
No, thank you so much, Sarif. I think thank you for covering the entire sector and the skilling needs across the sector. You've definitely provided everyone with a useful starting picture of where the most urgent gaps and opportunities lie. This is a good segue to our next segment as well. So thank you so much, everyone. Let me now move to some specific questions for each of you to bring out different parts of this transition. Anjali, let me begin with you. Eternal scale in electrifying last mile delivery, alongside initiatives supporting women's participation and worker skilling, they offer a unique lens into workforce transition. How have you gone about skilling your last mile workforce for the EV transition, and what have been some of the key learnings? Specifically, how are you thinking about safety training and inclusion of women, and not just women, but also specially able workforce in building a future-ready, accessible, and inclusive EV workforce at scale?
Thanks again. So in brief, we do see EVs as a key driver for inclusion in our fleet. Let me just give you some numbers. The fleet, active members of the fleet comprise about 8 lakh individuals. That means 8 lakh individuals log in to undertake at least one delivery with Zomato or Blinkit in a month. All right. Now, to ensure that 8 lakh people log in, we have to onboard at least double that number, 1.6 million people. Right. So, I mean, you've often heard that platforms are the fastest growing contributors to India's new opportunities, and that's very true, because India needs something like 8 million jobs a year, and between the platforms themselves, they're generating quite a bit. So now the fact is that not all that 1.6 million people who on board will necessarily have access to vehicles, right? Because a lot of them are migrants to cities. In fact, about 50% plus will be migrants in that group, and a lot of them may be students. EVs present an opportunity here, because we've seen fleet operators. Someone had mentioned Zip in the chat. Yes, operators like Zip and Yulu and many others across the country are targeting this group that are looking at delivery opportunities as a stepping stone to to creating a better future for themselves. I'll give you an example. About 20% of participants in gig work are students, specifically delivery work. Now, so students may not have their own bike at the moment, but they want to participate in undertaking deliveries. So they find it very easy to rent EVs from players like Yulu, or to sign up with a Zip and undertake deliveries using a Zip owned vehicle, right? And the good part with that model is that a lot of the issues that all of us spoke about, the servicing, the charging, all of that is taken care of by the rental company. So we see this as being the most dominant form of EV usage within our fleet. Currently, between Zomato and Blinkit, we have a little over 1 lakh riders. So out of 8 lakh, about 1 lakh riders are using EVs, and most of them are using rental EVs, more than 75%, and 90% are using low speed EVs, primarily because that is the stock that is also available with the rental players, right? We have not yet seen a lot of innovation as well as affordability for high speed EVs that are equal to ICE bikes, right, in terms of speed or aspiration. This is also a bit of a blocker to people buying EVs, because most young men in India would prefer to buy a Bajaj Pulsar, right? It's been for 50 plus years. They have been told that this is the ultimate status symbol, right? Or a Hero Honda. So the fact of the matter is that we have some distance to travel before EVs, the EV bikes become as aspirational. But what we've seen is that for migrants, for students, for people and a large proportion, more than 75% of people in gig work will participate for less than 6 hours a day. In fact, an average food delivery worker will only participate 38 days in a year, because they're looking for a top-up income. They're not looking at this as a primary source of income. They're looking to earn a bit of money, buy a phone, earn a bit of money, not have to ask their parents for pocket money, earn a bit of money, maybe pay off an old debt, right? So these are because of the way they want to use bikes for delivery, they have a preference also. If they don't already own a bike, or they can't easily borrow a bike, they have a preference for renting it. And the rental market right now has more EV players. So we see that their participation in delivery is enabled through EVs, and we benefit as well as a business. I think the group should know that the more options there are in rental, right now there are daily and weekly and monthly rental options, but we anticipate once the market gets into hourly rental, perhaps that could even open the EV usage market even more. Does this give you enough insights? We do have about overall 3,500 women participating in delivery, and about 3,000 it's 5,000 women and 3,500 people with disability participating in delivery. It's a mix of people with hearing and speech impairment and locomotor disability. These are large numbers because of exactly what I told you. The nature of delivery is part-time. And because it's fully flexible, you can log in when you want, log off when you want, and there are no penalties associated. It works for a lot of women and people with disability.
Thank you so much, Anjali, and thank you for sharing the nuances of the informal sector involving these driver partners. Let me now turn to the institutional side of this transition. My next question is for you, Professor Panigrahi. India's technical institutions are playing an increasingly important role in enabling the EV transition by preparing the next generation of engineers, researchers, technicians who are going to build, design, and sustain this ecosystem. EVs are not simply an extension of a conventional fuel vehicle. This requires capabilities in batteries, power electronics, software, charging systems, and whatnot. In this context, what are academic institutions doing right now in terms of collaborating with OEMs and training providers to prepare the future workforce? I also saw a question in the chat inquiring about how programs such as MTech, they are preparing workforces to get employed in the EV sector. So if you could touch upon these.
Yeah, thank you, Chetna. I'll touch upon very quickly. I know your time is running at a faster rate. So whatever we are talking of, we are not talking of only to limited skill development. Skill development comes with other development also. So you need, like I categorize it in two aspects. One is the technology, technical development. Another is the outreach to the people to change the mindset of the people to adapt the EV. In some cases, because range anxiety is there, charging infrastructure problem is there. And I must put here, charging infrastructure in some cases may not be the problem, but a smart charging infrastructure looking into the condition of the grid, because we only thought of my vehicle, my power. I never thought of if hundreds of vehicles are charged together, what will be the condition of the existing grid. Maybe Dr. Rajni will tell, because if it comes to the bus charging in a bus depot, which is really a challenge. So we are not talking here only for the skill development. We are talking the skill development from the lower level to the higher level. You see, that's why we have to create the manpower from the lower level, the repairing of the EV, to the research domain. For that, in our India, we have a well-structured educational system, starting from the vocational training to the IITs. Maybe the IITs will purely focus on the research and development of the products, indigenous product, because we must have to fulfill the vision of our Honorable Prime Minister, Viksit Bharat, and Made in India. That is the most important thing. So looking into that concept, maybe the higher level educational institutes, maybe IIT, NIT, they will come up to create the manpower in terms of the research, in terms of the technological development, in terms of the product development. Let me tell here, through this Atal Incubation Labs, through this startup ecosystem in various IITs and NITs, we are promoting the young entrepreneur and startups to have indigenous product in this EV domain. So when I'm talking of the product may be a hardware product, the product may be a software product. For example, finding a charger itself is a difficult. One India, one app is a great challenge, because every charger is having their own app. So that's why these are the very critical point where we have to develop the manpower. And that manpower need to understand the technology. EV domain, I used to tell in a lighter note, EV domain is such a domain, many ministries are involved, whether it is DHI, whether it is a DST, whether it is MIT, whether it is road transport, urban transport, whatever may be. All Ministry of Power is having some say on that. So that's why you can realize, if every ministry is interested in a particular theme, that means how important is it to the government, to the policymaker, and to the users also. That's why we need a holistic picture. Now, Sarif has categorically told, with TERI, IIT Delhi, we have started a program where we can educate some young generation in different domains. Either they educated in the battery management system, charging infrastructure, And like Rajesh has asked a question, what about the dealer? Yes, it is very important. We have started a program also in IIT Delhi to have the idea, broader scale, to the dealers through FADA, Federation of Automotive Dealer Association, where we are training the dealers. Because why it is important? The important is you might see the same manufacturer in the same name is having an electric vehicle as well as an ICE engine vehicle. So automatically it comes to the customer's mind, which one I will take. Then who will convince? They will not come to IIT or NIT to be convinced. Then ultimately it is the dealer or who is purchasing that vehicle in a very common literally sense without going in technical detail can convince the user to adopt the electric vehicle, or at least whether adopt or not is no biasing, at least to tell what is the benefit of using the vehicle. People tell if you will use electric vehicle will reduce pollution. Then everybody's mind comes into the picture. Am I the sole person to reduce the pollution? That is not the factor we have to tell. There are so many other factors for adoption of electric vehicle. So this is very important. Every education institute, like I told, starting from the vocational training at a lower level to the IIT should come forward. We are categorically collaborating with various OEMs also. Recently, we have opened a Hyundai Center of Excellence in association with IIT Delhi, IIT Madras, and IIT Bombay. Similarly, we are working with various OEMs. More closely, we are working with the young entrepreneur and startups. I have also negotiation or talk going on with GreenCell Mobility. Dr. Rajni is here. So many players are many, and we are there. That's why I always tell to everybody, the present scenario is not the competition, because in the starting, you don't have competition. It is a collaboration between various entities in support of the government, in support of the policy planning bodies, in support of RMI and others to make the awareness is a great challenge through which we can achieve it. And similarly, every IIT, everybody is having a certification program. And let me tell here lastly, we have started our first MTech in 2021, which was inaugurated by Amitabh Kantji, the first MTech in electric mobility. So we encourage different educational institute, either you have an MTech or MSR or a certificate course to do that. So I'll not take more time. Our objective is very clear. Our objective is the collaboration, and the problem should come from the industry. Yes, this is the problem we want to solve, quote, together, unquote. So that is the beauty, or that is thing where collectively we can do something for our mother India. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Panigrahi, and for sharing the efforts being taken by institutions, especially IITs in India. Let us now move to what workforce transition looks like in scale operations. Dr. Rajni, coming to you next. GreenCell Mobility is one of the largest electric bus operators, running a significant fleet and workforce across intercity routes in India. With electric fleets, how have workforce requirements changed for drivers, technicians, depot teams, frontline staff compared to the conventional buses? And what have been the most important lessons in building these new capabilities at scale?
Thanks. So for us at GreenCell, like all of us are aware that GreenCell works with a very strong inclusive agenda. And the idea of inclusivity is acceptance, understanding. Inclusive is not about just tagging around a gender number into your back office operations to show that you're very gender inclusive. Inclusive is not hiring people, across genders and then not giving them customer facing roles. So I'll tell you what we have done at GreenCell. We saw a lot of potential in terms of, see mobility as a space. Sorry. Yeah. So mobility as a space needs is very dependent on not just your workforce, but also the external environment. So if you see aspects like safety, aspects like running operations, and aspects like battery charging maintenance, it's not always your stuff. It's also the impact which is created because your customers who are getting impacted, which is both in the B2G or B2C kind of a sector, in both which we operate. As we were growing and as we have been growing, our learnings have been very clear. We do not shy away from making mistakes. We said that, Initially, we tried sending people to China, Skywell, to get in training and all. But was that long term? Do you really envisage that long term when you have a skilling as an agenda? Maybe no. So we got people back, we did train the trainers, and today we have a lot of ITIs who are working with us, and we've invested in them. And they are creating the maintenance pipeline. Maintenance in mass mobility specifically is the spine for any automobile, is the spine of that system. Now, to have this, it couldn't be a 6 month target program. It had to be it had to be a deep dive investment, both in terms of financials, in terms of understanding that whole concept that, how would you really take this to the next level? Getting the first women coach captain on board to drive, say Delhi, Agra, it wasn't easy because a lot of time on the road, people have a bias that that's a women driver. So what do you do? So you are operating in a space which is very highly prejudiced by the external environment. So while you have an agenda, you also have to be very practical and pragmatic about the whole aspect that, how are you going to help? If you want to help, how are you going to help? And how is this going to help you? So today, if you actually ask me, our workforce, whether it is our trans workforce, whether it is our women coach captains, whether it is our people with disability and otherwise the routine skilled workforce, also all of them. So for us, diversity as an agenda has been both skill, gender, migrant population, because that is the objective. See, what do you want to achieve through skilling? You don't want people to leave their homes. The opportunity should be created right there so that he doesn't have to come out and you don't have to pay more, because if he's closer to home, you don't have to pay more. It works easier for them. So you have to look at it as a holistic agenda and then kind of do it. We've been very fortunate. We have people who've kind of, the business, which is our fund team, which is Eversource Foundation. Eversource has been very, very, very compassionate when it comes to diversity as an agenda. Our investee partners have been very compassionate. You need to have that view, that overriding view that you will make this investment and it will see light of the day in a year and a half, and so on and so forth. But I think the next year looks more promising with more buses coming, and you have a redeployment of staff going. So the people who would have otherwise relocated when we had hired them now are going back to their own cities. So yeah, it's pretty overwhelming, the journey. And but I would just say that, skilling is targeting skilling per se for workforce is like not really conducting or giving somebody pills. It's like a surgical thing. You have to really see the deep dive that where is that it is lagging, what you need to build. It starts right from the people who are washing the buses to the people who are working behind the wheels. Everybody, it's just not one, and it's all. And of course the treatment has to be different because you need to understand specific needs, but it is across. It's across.
Thank you, Dr. Rajni. And I think you've rightly pointed out, we need to not just localize EVs, but also localize our trainings and skillings. So Damini, let me come to you next. Workforce transition in EVs is not just a technical challenge, and it requires shifting awareness, trust, and aspirations. And through your initiative, especially with truck drivers, you've done a lot of work. What have you learned about what it actually takes to make EV-related jobs feel credible, accessible, and aspirational for workers? I also saw in the chat that there are questions around what is it taking, what are the main barriers for trucking electrification? So if you could just touch upon those as well.
Sure. Sorry, can you hear me? I think one of the biggest barriers around electrification is the fact that there is lack of awareness of the technology. I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have is that they almost see that this technology as just a technology, and they don't see it rooted in people's identity and how aspirational it can be. For us, it was very critical that when we did it, that we actually attach this modernization or this transition to the professional identity and the pride that people have in trucking. The truck drivers don't see this just as a job, they see this as an identity. They see themselves as a mover in the country of logistics, of freight, of economy. They see themselves as movers of the economy. So when we were introducing the concepts around the technology, it was not to erase their identity, but how does this technology evolve their identity? How does it reflect their culture visually and through narratives, so that it's not seen as a replacement, but like I said, like an evolution. Also, understanding that because we were working mostly with the informal trucking sector, and the fleet operators that were smaller and of medium fleets, the trust development we had to do had to be completely hyper local. We consistently found that when we were talking in highly technical, policy driven messaging, it just didn't land. For us, it was very critical that we built simple, familiar communication in language that felt that was coming from the community rather than from outside the community. So when the information was shared in culturally recognizable ways, it became far more believable, and therefore the call to action we made of building interest in the technology became actionable. And then the third most important thing was to make it aspirational. And that was one of the most personal drivers for this was dignity and family well-being. When we were talking in our initial research and insight building work with fleet operators, all of them mentioned how they don't want their second generation to come into the trucking ecosystem, to come into the trucking industry. So that was one. And there are like anecdotal things that they said was, we don't want our daughters and sons to pick up phones at 11 in the night and get abused by toll booth workers and by policemen and thanedars. That is not the life we want for them. And so it became critical that when we spoke about the evolution of the trucking space, it also became about how EV adoption looks at bettering their lives and creating more stable futures with greater respect for the trucking community in itself. And that was a far more compelling argument. And to the second part of your question of how we did this, I think the first thing was, like I mentioned previously, it had to be user centric and evidence led. The most effective communication and engagement strategies began with listening to the stakeholders themselves. So many times we just did immersive exercises of having small focus group discussions, chai pe charchas, in-depth interviews, where we brought these insights and then validated them through co-creations that we did with multi-stakeholders. The second is that all the engagement we created with the truckers was adaptive and feedback responsive. So it wasn't just a one time interaction we were having with these truck drivers. It was a continuity and a continuum that we created with them. So we took them on a journey with us. So when there were questions that were asked in one Chai Pe Charcha, we strive to include those FAQs into content that we were creating for our digital infrastructure. And then the third thing was that all of the content we were creating had a distinct visual identity to it. It was aspirational, it was relatable, and the intent was to create neutral but trustworthy rather than commercially driven content. We did not want to be seen as people who were pushing the technology. We were happy to talk about the failures of the technology. We also always caveated anything we said by saying that this is an evolving technology, so what we are saying today will have to be revisited in a couple of years or couple of months, so this is not God's own truth. So a lot of entering those conversations with caveats by qualifying what we were saying, I think that was the most important part of how we build trust. And underlying all of this was transparency around the fact that we were not creating jobs, we were not offering jobs, we were only introducing the technology and building awareness around the technology for them.
Thank you, Sudhamini. I think let me now turn to the infrastructure side of things. Sharif, coming to you. Charging infrastructure is often discussed in terms of deployment and network scale, less in terms of the workforce need and institutional capacity that's needed not just to plan, install, but also operate and maintain it effectively. From your perspective, what are the most critical steps needed to build a workforce that can cater to charging infrastructure segment? And there are several questions around how to take care of the maintenance, servicing, and how to ensure that the grid impact of the charging infrastructure can be minimized. So if you could touch upon those.
Yeah, thanks, Chetna. I think won't take much time because we are running out of time as is. From a skilling perspective, of course, a lot of CPOs are taking on to themselves, like the OEMs, to come up with a skilled workforce to cater to their service in terms of charging. And that's where we came in the picture, the IIT, TERI, and EVI Tech collaboration. We developed a course which was a syllabus which was vetted by NCVET under the skilling and vocational training, and which also catered to the OEM request of putting in AI ML into the syllabus and curriculum. And that really is the need of the hour. And I'll just give you one example from a recent, finding a charger which is working and which was not working. So one of the OEMs charging CPU, and there is the charger is on a highway, and I was not seeing that charger on the map on their app. I called the person there at the customer care and tried to find out what's happening because it was not live for 10-15 days. But from a reliability perspective, a user would want that charger and not go through any surprises while driving through the highway, right? So very interestingly, the information that was shared was that a person was scheduled to visit that charger in the evening, and that information was there with that customer care. And he said that the charger would be online hopefully by evening or tomorrow morning and the next day. And rightly enough, the early morning next day I checked, it was live. What I'm meaning to say is that a lot of charging CPO requirement from a skill perspective would, of course, be very localized, as also was mentioned earlier. These skill set need not be there on the urban level or even on the rural level, but it needs to be intermittently on the highways as well. And these are far-flung, far-off areas. If we can have resources at McDonald's at the center of a highway, why can't we have a charge point operator or a service person at the highway also, which is also localized in nature? So that the efforts are going on, but again, to the point, are we catering to entire ecosystem? No. We also need a huge investment and collaborations on ground to make it happen. On the charging point, making it more of a grid-related discussion. There are solutions coming up even at megawatt level for off-grid charging solutions. We are aware because we are working with ESL on this front to install off-grid megawatt chargers for HDVs and buses, which could cater to large, huge demand for electricity, which will also help in stabilizing, in a way, the grid. There is a challenge of cost, upfront cost, of course. We are aware of it. But I think as we scale up on that front, the cost will, of course, as we have seen in the solar and EVs as well now, the scale will help in reducing the charge of installation, the cost of installation of these off-grid solutions to tackle. And the other solution that we can think of, and there's nothing new in this, is that charge of day or daytime charging would be, or the cost for scheduled charging would be different for night and day. So that would also help in stabilizing the grid as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Sharif, and thank you so all the participants as well for sending in a lot of exciting and thoughtful questions. I've tried to integrate those in my questions to the speakers. I know we are over time. If I must just take 2 to 3 minutes, really wanted to do this rapid fire round. I'll ask one question at a time and come to each of you in the same order that we've been following. Just a word or a short phrase. Um, First question is, what's the one new skill set emerging from the EV transition that excites you the most? Starting with Anjali.
One new skill set emerging from the EV transition. I think green finance is I'm particularly interested in, primarily because without finance, most people in India cannot buy bikes. So we need actually especially tailored financial solutions. More than 50% of people who buy a bike today need financing. So and that's going to continue to be the reality for EVs as well.
Thanks, Anjali. Dr. Panigai, in one word or a sentence.
Yeah, for me, it is green energy because being a power engineer and we power our EV, we always tell the tailpipe emission of the EV is zero, but the wheel-to-wheel emission and others things are there. So when I'm talking of green energy, it is a sustainable green energy for the EV infrastructure. So maybe we can use solar and all these power systems. So that's one term, green energy.
Dr. Rajni?
I think it's not really an acquired skill, but yeah, an acquired behavior, I would say. A lot of cross knowledge sharing and kind of, not feeling shy to ask for help and kind of leveraging with other partners. Because if everybody tries to set up their own thing, the development will be a little, it'll be a little phased out. We want to do it faster and touch the scale. So cross learning.
Sadamini?
Actually, going second to last has its advantages and disadvantages. Mine was going to be knowledge sharing and knowledge management too, but I'm going to stick to that.
Arif?
Thanks. Again, being the last one, I had enough time to think through, so the answer should be interesting. One thing which is really interesting in the EV domain, as we all know that these EVs are basically computers on wheel, right? So I think cloud diagnostics and troubleshooting is one area which I see a lot of interest coming in.
Thanks, Sharif. Now, very quickly, for India's EV revolution, what's more urgent right now? Reskilling or recruiting? Just one word answer. Anjali?
Recruiting, I would think, because we are going to sell more two-wheelers overall, because more people are going to migrate into cities, which are the engines of growth. We ourselves are going to create a lot of opportunities in cities. But it also means more people need more bikes overall. And for that, you are going to need a very strong ICE industry as well as an EV industry. Therefore, recruitment and skilling for first-time jobbers is going to be very important.
Dr. Panigai?
Yeah, for me, it is 50-50. My answer is 50-50 in the sense you need both. You need reskilling as well as you need new recruit. So have a balance between
Dr. Rajni?
I would say reskilling because there's a lot of skill available. There is a lot of, the talent available. Talent needs opportunity. Provide the opportunity. That's how it should be.
Sadamini?
I think I would reframe the idea of reskilling because reskilling almost gives a signal to the existing workforce that they are part and welcome to the future of the sector. And I think that's a very powerful message to send around empowerment. So it would be repositioning the identity as reskilled.
Sharif?
I would go with Professor. I can't go against. I mean, I completely agree with the professor on having 50-50. Both is required at this stage.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, and thank you for staying over for 5 minutes. Thank you to all the panelists as well as our participants. What comes through clearly is that India's EV transition is not just about technology or infrastructure. It's also about building the people, skills, institutions, and systems that are needed to make this transition more inclusive and effective. Thank you to everyone who joined us for this 7th session. And thank you again to our speakers for sharing their insights. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Absolute pleasure. And I think great experiential learning. Thank you. Look forward.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Namaste.
you.
We'll meet again sometime, Somaya. Thank you.
Thank you.